See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. We're on 5. This is your 5th Spreadsheet Life Excel challenge. And in this video, I'm going to be testing your skills on, wait for it, lookup functions. That's right. You're going to get 4 questions from easy to hard to test your skills when it comes to lookup functions in Microsoft Excel. Also, you can find a link to download the spreadsheet in the description below. That way, you can attempt each question before you watch me do it. If that sounds like a good time to you, well, then let's get to it. Okie dokie. For question number 1, your task is to write a formula to look up the exam grade that Yoda received for exam number 2. Now, there are many different ways that you can solve this question, but for this video, I will be using the HLOOKUP function. And that's because the grades for each student go down rows instead of across columns, so the HLOOKUP function fits this setup quite well. That being said, selecting cell F10, enter the formula, equals, HLOOKUP function, select cell C10, then for the second argument, select the range C4 through J7. For the third argument, enter in the value of 3, and for the last argument, enter in false. Then close parentheses and press enter. The HLOOKUP function takes the lookup value in cell C10, and it looks for this value within the top row of the selected range. Once the function locates the lookup value, it moves down to row 3 as specified by the third argument, and then it returns the value that it finds there. Also, the false for the fourth argument is what allows the HLOOKUP function to search for an exact match of the lookup value rather than an approximate match. As a result, you get back Yoda's grade for exam number 2. That completes question number 1, so let's move on to question 2. For question number 2, your task is to write a formula to calculate the letter grade for each student based on the table shown on the right. To complete question 2, start by selecting cell D5. Then, in the formula bar, enter the formula, equals, VLOOKUP function, and then select cell C5 for the first argument. For the second argument, select the range F5 through G9, and you want this reference to be an absolute reference so that it does not change when you copy this formula down for the other students. So, to make this an absolute reference, press the F4 key on your keyboard. When you do, the dollar signs are automatically added to the reference to make this an absolute reference. Awesome. Now for the third argument of the VLOOKUP function, enter in a value of 2. You do this because you want back the letter grade from the selected range, and the letter grades sit in the second column of this range. Therefore, you enter in a 2. You can then close parentheses and hit enter. And since you left off the fourth argument of the VLOOKUP function, this function will search for an approximate match by default. In other words, the VLOOKUP function looks for the value in the first column of the lookup range that is closest to and less than or equal to the lookup value. And that is why you get back the letter grade of A for the first student. The score of 93, or the lookup value, matches the minimum score of 90. And that's because 90 is the closest value to 93 that is also less than or equal to 93. That being said, to complete question 2, use the fill handle to copy the formula down for all of the remaining students. Wonderful. With question 2 complete, let's move on to question number 3. For question number 3, your task is to write a formula to calculate the quiz score for any selected student and quiz. In other words, you'll be doing a two-way lookup. To solve question 3, it is probably best to use a combination of the index and match functions. So, selecting cell J7, enter the following formula. Equals, index function, and then select the range C5 through G12, which contains all of the grades. Next, add a comma, and then enter the match function. Now for the first argument of the match function, select the student in cell J4. Then, for the second argument, select the list of students in B5 through B12. Finally, enter a 0 to force the match function to search for an exact match. Then close parentheses and add a comma to move to the third argument of the index function. Next, enter the match function again, and then select the quiz in cell J5. Then, for the second argument of the match function, select the quizzes in C4 through G4. Finally, enter a 0 for the third argument to force an exact match. You can then close parentheses twice, and then press enter. The two match functions locate the relative position of the selected student and the selected quiz, and then these numbers are then passed to the index function, which returns the value at the intersection of the specified row and column. And just like that, you get back the quiz score for the selected student and the selected quiz. That completes question 3, so we can go ahead and move to question 4. For your final question, you must write a formula to return the letter grade of the student whose name begins with the indicated letter. To complete question 4, I think that using the XLOOKUP function would be the easiest thing to do. So, selecting cell G6, enter the formula, equals, XLOOKUP function, and then select the lookup value in cell G4. Now you want to search for the name that begins with the lookup value, but the letters that come after don't matter. In other words, you want the first letter to match the lookup value, and then all of the other letters after should be considered a match no matter what they are. So, to create a match like this, you must use the wildcard character, which is an asterisk. You do this by adding an ampersand, and then quotation mark, asterisk, quotation mark. Writing the first argument like this means that the XLOOKUP function will try to match the value in cell G4, and then the wildcard character will match anything that comes after that value. So the only thing that needs to match here is the first letter. Now for the second argument of the XLOOKUP function, select the lookup range, which is of course the names listed in B5 through B8. And for the third argument, select the return range, which holds the letter grades in D5 through D8. Then type in 2 commas to come to the fifth argument of the XLOOKUP function, and then make that argument a 2. And that's because whenever you use the wildcard character in the first argument of the XLOOKUP function, you must make the fifth argument a 2. This will allow the XLOOKUP function to use the wildcard character in its search. If you leave off the fifth argument, then your formula will not work correctly. So remember to always make the fifth argument a 2 whenever you use the wildcard character in the first argument of the XLOOKUP function. That being said, you can now close parentheses and hit enter. The XLOOKUP function searches for the text that begins with the selected letter in cell G4 and returns the corresponding value from the return range, which is of course the letter grade. And that officially completes question number 4 and your 5th Spreadsheet Life Excel challenge. So I've got to ask, was looking up stuff in Excel really easy, or was it pretty difficult? Let me know in the comments below how you did. I would really like to know. On top of that, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, I highly encourage you to subscribe. That being said, thanks for sticking around and challenging yourself for the day, and I guess until next time, I will see you in the next Spreadsheet Life video.